everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Bridget, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending that to the email address you registered with. So no worries if you need to step away or want to revisit any of the information later on. Today's session is brought to you by Responsum for CKD, an online community of over 15,000 engaged patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals, supported by Otsuka Pharmaceutical. And we're also thrilled to be partnering with Cookbook, a nutrition-forward resource offering delicious recipes, helpful guides, and tools for those living with CKD, as well as Happy Health Nutrition, a virtual private practice specializing in kidney health. Now we are in for a real treat today as we are joined by a fan favorite from our community, Lauren Levy, who will be sharing her expert insights on navigating the CKD diet during the holidays. Welcome, Lauren. We are so glad to have you back today.
Thank you, Bridget. I am so happy to talk about this today because talking about holiday cooking is one of my most favorite things to do. I am a dietitian after all, and food is my passion. So this is a really, really fun webinar. So thank you again to Responsum for CKD for having me back and getting a chance to talk to you all. As Bridget mentioned, my name is Lauren. I am a registered dietitian and a board certified specialist in renal nutrition. I have been working with people exclusively with kidney disease since 2010. And in that time, I have helped people from stage 1, new inherited diagnosis, no kidney issues, all the way to dialysis. And so I'm always happy and so excited to speak to you all, regardless of where you are in your own kidney path. Now I run a virtual insurance-based private practice, Happy Health Nutrition, where I do see patients via telehealth, and we focus on concepts like things like today, figuring out how to navigate healthy ways to eat over the holidays. And I'm also the nonprofit director at cookbook.org. That we are a patient advocacy group that we share nutrition and recipe information that is plant-based and kidney friendly. And all of the recipes that we'll be sharing today are on that website as well. So you can easily find that information for yourself. So with this, let's get started. What we're going to cover today are the general kidney nutrition principles. We are not going to be talking about stages of kidney disease and answering specific nutrition questions related to where you may be, but instead we're going to be talking about general principles and how to make meal changes into either the foods you choose to put on your plate for holidays or a special occasion, or the foods that you make. If you want or are looking for some more one-on-one type information or specific information related to your stage of kidney disease, I would recommend either reach out to me on the side through Happy Health Nutrition or view some of the other videos that webinars we've also done that can help you. We will also be talking about holistic ways to enjoy your holiday. We've got a short food demo. As well as we're going to be going through simple recipe modifications so that when you're sitting down to that holiday meal, you can feel good and secure in the food choices that you're making. The recipes we're going to be talking about today are much more focused on American Thanksgiving. However, they can be applied to any real holiday tradition that you may be following. And lastly, as always, I'll be answering questions and very happy to talk turkey with you at the end. So let's start with cooking tips. Regardless of where you are in your kidney journey and your kidney path, I want you to remember some of these things. You can and absolutely should choose frozen foods. Frozen foods are just as healthy as fresh foods, and they can be much more budget conscious. It is always wonderful to honor cultural food practices. Just because many of the recipes we will be talking about today are Americanized Thanksgiving does not mean that they are somehow healthier for you than what you're currently eating in your own culture, in your own family traditions. Try to utilize in-season fruits and veggies, as well as don't feel obligated to have to eat organic because it's somehow healthier. We really want to make sure that you're getting total nutrition, not necessarily breaking the bank trying to follow a specific recipe. So one of the greatest ways to be much more budget conscious is to use in-season fruits and veggies. Leave the salt out. I cannot tell you how many times I hear from my patients that they can't cook this way or they don't want to do something that way because their loved one really likes salty food. It is much easier to add salt to your food than it is to take it out afterwards. And so if you are someone, and you probably are watching this webinar, that has been told to limit your sodium, this is a great way to make the whole plate generally healthier and not have to worry too much about how much of the portion of those specific foods. Consider reducing added sugar and fat for total health, and freeze or share leftovers from your meal so that you don't fall into that scarcity mindset of, I only make this once a year, or my mom only makes this once a year. I need to make sure I get as much of it as I can. Instead, make an extra plate or freeze the leftovers. And then those leftovers that stare at us and look so good, but we know we shouldn't have more than that one time, send them home with somebody else and enjoy the ones that are healthy for you. And please do not forget to ask for help, whether that is asking for help in food preparation or asking for help of your guests or your host of saying, I really am looking out for X, Y, or Z. Are there foods that you're currently preparing that would fall into that? The majority of us are just so happy that we're able to feed the people that we care about in ways that is good for them, that it's not going to put people out. So let's talk about this general piece of goals for nutrition care. If you're watching this webinar or attending live, I want you to take a moment and identify for yourself, where do you sit on this spectrum of care? Are you currently in chronic kidney disease and trying to prevent further kidney damage? Are you on dialysis and you're maintaining good nutrition status and really trying to lessen your risk for heart disease? Or have you had a transplant and you want to minimize side effects of medication, reduce your risk of losing your kidney? Because these are big concepts on where to identify what is important to me. What modifications do I need to make when choosing the foods for Thanksgiving? Because we are going to have a lot of information we're talking about, and not everything is something that you should follow. You want to pick out those specific characteristics, nutrients that pertain to you, and avoid the food noise around it if it doesn't pertain to you, so that you make the least restrictive choices and can enjoy your holiday. Another thing I get all the time is I have diabetes and kidney disease. And so the two different diets are so hard. This is not the case. Everything we're going to talk about today, you can apply to both kidney health and diabetic health or having diabetes. Focus on filling your plate with half non-starchy vegetables in order to increase fiber and reduce carbohydrate and build a total balanced plate. Consider reducing added sugar in recipes. Can you leave things like honey, brown sugar, white sugar, agave, things like that out, or reduce the amount that the original recipe calls for? Consider incorporating movement throughout the day. Even though this isn't food, you're going to see this as a common theme through this presentation. And think about fruit as a dessert. Fruit can be a great dessert. And most importantly, enjoy your holiday in whatever way that you are celebrating. So, of the kidney friendly eating patterns, we are going to isolate and talk about salt and water, protein, potassium, and phosphorus. The next set of slides are going to go through what is important about these individual nutrients and how through meal prep can I make changes in order to make my plate a little more kidney friendly. And remember, if your plate might not have to reduce all of these things. Take a moment now and think through, is do I need to worry about phosphorus? Has somebody told me I need to worry about phosphorus? And answer that for yourself. So I'm going to take a second and think through for yourself. Okay, I need to focus on and answer that question for yourself. Salt and water. So high salt intake can increase blood pressure. This is why your nephrologist or doctor has told you to follow a low salt diet. The majority of people with kidney disease or kidney issues have been told to follow a low sodium or low salt diet. There are rare times that this is not the case, but if that is the case, someone would have told you. So the majority of people are told to follow a low salt diet. Salt and water are like magnets to each other. And so we also want to be aware of fluids. You want to be adequately hydrated. However, there are certain people, especially in later stages of kidney disease or who may have specific heart issues, that have been told to follow a fluid restriction. And this is an important thing to do regardless of the holiday. There are some things that we can kind of put to the side or less emphasis on, but you don't want to end up in the hospital over fluid overload if you are somebody who follows a fluid restriction. So remember that alcohol, tea, coffee, soup, ice cream, they all count towards fluids. Anything that is liquid in your mouth counts as a fluid. And so you just want to be aware of that, because sometimes during a holiday, we can enjoy ourselves and not quite focus on how much am I drinking in that day. When trying to follow a low salt diet, it's always important to try and utilize no added salt canned products or read the nutrition labels to identify how much salt is in the product. Some canned and packaged goods don't have salt in it and they're not labeled low sodium. So reading the packaged is important. And don't forget that you can and should rinse the food whenever possible. We think about this especially with canned beans or vegetables, that you can rinse it and reduce the salt. Consider choosing frozen or fresh veggies whenever possible. And watch out for frozen meats. Frozen meats can be enhanced with sodium, phosphorus, or potassium additives. And so you want to read the food label before, as you're picking up that meal or that food product from the grocery store. Just because it is chicken and it's frozen doesn't mean it doesn't have additives in it. And consider allowing people to add salt at the time of the meal. Things like gravy and dressings and dips are all tend to be higher in salt. So if you make the majority of your foods low sodium, the side dishes and main dishes, that gives people the opportunity, if they choose to either salt their food at the table or add the gravies and the things that people like to add at that moment. Another thing is when it comes to gravy, don't just pour the gravy all over your plate. Consider putting a little to the side and either dipping in your food or adding just a little bit, enough to taste, because gravies tend to be very high in salt or sodium. Protein. Depending on where you are in the spectrum, you may have been told to limit the amount of protein. You definitely can and absolutely should feel comfortable choosing a vegetarian or vegan Thanksgiving if that is something that you enjoy. Many people don't like turkey or traditional Thanksgiving type of foods. Don't feel obligated to have those if that's not what you enjoy. Meat tends to be harder on kidneys and high in potassium. And so, if you, regardless of if you have meat or not, or trying to eat vegetarian or vegan or not, if you're going to include meat on the plate, keep it to a quarter of the plate only. Balance the rest of the plate out with the veggies and the sides as a way to make your plate naturally kidney friendly. Remember that brines or preserved meats, many of the meat is where the salt is hiding on your plate, even though you may not think of it being high in salt. An alternative often to American Thanksgiving from turkey is ham. Ham is very high in salt. And so you do want to be aware of where is that salt on your plate, even when we're talking about protein. Oh, potassium. Not everyone needs a potassium restriction. If you are someone that has been told to limit potassium, or if you're someone who has been told you don't generally need to limit potassium, but you should have an awareness, there are some tips and tricks that you can use in order to not have to worry too much about the proportions and what is on your plate. Knowing the foods that are high in potassium is a good way to just generally educate yourself. So as you're pulling food from the main dish onto your plate or portioning yourself, you can put those high potassium foods in smaller portions and build the rest of your plate around mostly lower potassium choices. Potassium is important in every meal, and so you don't want to feel this pressure that you should have a no potassium diet. That is absolutely not the case. If you are someone that needs to follow a low potassium diet, or if you're someone that just wants to enjoy themselves and not quite have to do so much food math, double boiling potatoes is a great way to reduce the potassium out of potatoes, because potatoes, regardless of the color, are very high in potassium. And consider soaking beans overnight. So let's take a moment to talk about these two types of meal prep activities. Double boiling potatoes is when you peel and chop the potato, put it in a pot with water, bring to a boil. When it's about halfway done, ditch the water, put fresh water, cover the potatoes with fresh water, boil again. Remove the water. This double boiling leaches out the extra potassium and allows people to enjoy potatoes when normally they would not be able to. Another quick hack is soaking beans overnight. And this can be done actually with canned beans. And I like to take the canned bean out the night before, run it through the colander, rinse it, put it in a Tupperware, and then bring the water to above the beans, and then put the Tupperware back in the fridge overnight. This long type of soaking will also reduce potassium if that's what you need to follow. And one of my favorite bean hacks is that chickpeas, fun fact, are lower in potassium and phosphorus than chicken is. So when in doubt, choose a chickpea. And just if you want to, really just make simple swaps for lower potassium choices. There are many foods that are naturally lower in potassium and just as festive. So let's go through some examples of really easy swaps. Potatoes of any color can be swapped many times for cauliflower in roasts or mashes. Cooked greens tend to be very high in potassium. Think about what happens when you take fresh spinach on a fry pan and you put the spinach on the fry pan. It goes from this huge mound of spinach down to almost nothing. That condensing of all those leaves and shriveling increases the potassium. So instead, look for either raw arugula, or you can cook kale. Kale doesn't cook down quite to the same level of spinach and is slightly lower in potassium. So you can much more easily add those types of foods in as a nice swap out. We already talked about beans. You can switch for soaked beans. Condensed milk can be high in potassium. You can swap that out for non-dairy milk. Artichokes are a higher potassium source, but green beans are just as festive. Pumpkin is high in potassium, but apple is not. So if you are choosing between two desserts and there's pumpkin in front of you or apple, choose, when in doubt, choose the apple. Or there are many kidney friendly recipes that include pumpkin in things like pumpkin muffins or pumpkin bread, that have actually much less potassium than pumpkin pie. And in general, winter squashes are wonderful and beautiful and great options, but they are rich in potassium. Spaghetti squash is one example, and the biggest example of a winter squash that is in fact a lower potassium choice. And lastly, we think about phosphorus. Phosphorus is a long-term number that your doctor and dietitian will focus on if that pertains to you. One meal of having a high phosphorus meal is not going to hurt you, but over the long term, we want to make sure that we keep our phosphorus in range. So reading labels and avoiding phosphorus additives is extremely important. If you are prescribed a phosphorus binder, just take your binder with your meal and ask your doctor or dietitian, depending on where you are, about the binder dose, because your doctor oftentimes may encourage you to adjust that binder dose based on how large of the meal that you're eating or the foods that you're choosing. But most importantly, take your binders as prescribed and with that meal, and you should be just fine. As far as food prep, avoiding additives is always going to be the best choice, but choosing vanilla or fruit over chocolate is technically a lower phosphorus choice, and utilizing less dairy will also help. So let's talk about the day of, right? We're going to talk about this in a few different types of scenarios. When we go through the day of the meal, we really want to think about, what is our schedule? How am I going to move my body? What does that meal look like? And how am I going to enjoy myself? Take the angst out. Planning is the best way to take the angst and worry and concern about what am I going to eat from the day. So start with a plan. That plan, the day of the meal, should allow you to think through, what is being served or what am I serving? You want to eat as usual. Don't try and skimp out in order to save up for Thanksgiving, because oftentimes that can lead to overeating. Fill your plate with veggies, as we talked about, and allow yourself a balanced plate. And make sure you consider movement. Movement can look a lot of different ways. That can be doing a 5K with your family. It can be going for a yoga class, taking a pet for a walk, or even making sure to do some simple chair movements and stretches. And remember to enjoy yourself. If you are hosting, sometimes that can be really stressful, or it is really stressful no matter what holiday tradition, when you are the host. All of these same principles are extremely important to survive the day and actually have a good time. So make your plan. Plan out, when am I going to not only cook my food, but prep my food? Maybe considering starting a whole day or a couple days ahead of the meal, especially if you're someone that gets tired or it hurts to stand and chop for long periods of time, don't make the day harder on yourself than you need to. Start a couple days ahead. And make sure that in this plan, you prioritize yourself. Yes, you're there to host, but in order to be your best host, you need a couple timeouts for yourself. When the meal is being served or when you're choosing your foods, you may have certain individuals that you're feeding that you want to feed that want your special dishes that may not be that healthy. That's fine. Make the decision for yourself. Am I going to choose that meal? And fill your plate with veggies. You don't necessarily have to eat all of the foods that you prepare. And ultimately, if you're making it, then you get to call the shots. And don't forget that. Make sure with movement that you really do prioritize movement. Taking a walk, doing stretches to help with to break up all that time that you're spent prepping or standing over the stove. And make sure to enjoy the people around you. Or if you're by yourself, make sure to call a loved one or connect with somebody or something that really brings you joy. Now, when you're a guest, you lose control, right? You're not in the driver's seat of what is being made. However, there are some ways that you can take back your control and feel confident going into the situation. Make sure that you go in with a plan. Call ahead or text or email. Talk to your host and say, can I bring a dish? And bring a dish that everyone can enjoy that is kidney friendly. If you don't, that dish can be something as simple as, if you're not a cook, pick up some vegetables, some pre-cut baby carrots, pre-cut celery, and hummus. Make it easy for yourself. If you are a cook, consider bringing a heavier dish that you know that you can enjoy, and so may others. A salad is also another good one if you're not a cook. And then make sure that if you're traveling long distance, get movement in. Make sure you get movement in. Whether you're worried about your kidney health, whether you're worried about your blood sugar, movement is key to this. If you are someone that needs to worry about blood sugar, sitting long periods of time is not healthy for anyone. And at the meal, fill your plate with veggies and make a to-go plate. Most people cook more than they are planning on, and a to-go plate is always usually helpful for the host so that you can feel like you can get all the foods that you like in the portions that you want, and you don't have to feel like you need to load up your plate on foods that you might not see again for another year or many months later. And then give yourself a chance to enjoy yourself. After the meal, think about asking for that plate or leftovers, freezing down individual portions to utilize leftovers appropriately, and especially if you're the guest, ask to help do some dish duty. Getting that movement in post meal can prevent a lot of the fatigue and the sluggishness. Don't just roll yourself from the table onto the couch to watch football. Instead, get up, help clean up, or take a walk. Take a pet for a walk. Do something, and make sure that you're enjoying your company. Most people will be happy to get a little bit of movement in before then heading back to the table, the couch, or wherever the next place is in your day. So now let's really talk turkey and go through some recipes and some modifications. First and foremost, as we talk through recipe swaps, you can decide to swap specific ingredients that can reduce sodium, potassium, phosphorus, added sugar or calories, protein. You do not need to feel like you have to take it all off of every single recipe. You may want to look at the foods that you're making, identify the ones that are already pretty healthy, and see if there are just simple modifications here or there that you can make to a couple of them so that you feel like you're still retaining the essence of the holiday and what is important to you, but making a little bit of a lighter, kidney friendly version. And when you build this plate I keep talking about, make it look this way. This plate that you see has a variety of vegetables and plants on it. So I'm not suggesting that you stick to just a couple things when there's this whole smorgasbord of food in front of you. Make the plate the majority of veggies. And if you are someone who worries about blood sugar, make sure that those are non-starchy, and then allow yourself a little bit of balance and indulgence. You can see I have a little turkey leg here, as well as a little mashed potatoes, but the majority of the plate is veggies. Give yourself hydration in the sense of water and allow for some of those indulgent sides like gravies to be on the side and add the flavor that you want without just pouring all over the top. Use that salt or sodium wisely. So let's break it down by parts of the meal. When it comes to appetizers, consider swapping for low or unsalted foods. Fresh foods are a great way to do this instead of using the salty and processed dips. So sometimes it's easy, especially if you're the host, to throw out some dips and chips as other people are starting to get hungry, but you're trying to focus on the meal. Instead, choose fresh foods. And the reason why is because many times the easy, convenient options are very salty, and you're already going to have an indulgent meal. Sometimes they can also have added phosphorus or potassium or even protein in ways too. So you want to think about choosing fresh fruits and veggies instead of pickled ones. Choose lower sodium and phosphorus options like hummus over some higher salt options, and choose unsalted crackers, chips, popcorn, or rice cakes as those holdover foods till the main event. When it comes to main dishes, understand and know where are these hidden trigger spots for you. Marinated or prepared meats with spices and herbs is a better choice instead of high salt brines. If you're the guest at the table, sit down and ask. People like to talk about how they made something. Ask, how did you make this turkey? Listen to hear, did they brine it for 24 hours? Did they deep fry it? And find out where it is that you can make your on the fly changes. And why do we want to make these changes? These dishes can be very high in salt, phosphorus, protein, potassium. And so the main dishes tend to be where we can have an opportunity for taste, but not necessarily have to be the actual main of our meal. And so you can look for no added salt poultry seasoning or make your own, and use fresh herbs as a way to season in place of high salt brines. So here, an example of a kidney friendly swap could be that turkey, that brine turkey, for a veggie pot pie. You may say, Lauren, you're crazy. I can't have Thanksgiving without turkey. And that's fine. Try and choose the lower sodium option. If that's not in your control, remove the skin to get through some of the sodium or the fat and allow for a little more flavor. So let's dig into this veggie pot pie. How would you actually make it?
We'll start by sauteing the onions in vegetable oil for 2 to 3 minutes. Add in the garlic and cook for an additional 1 to 2 minutes. Add in the vegetable mix, diced potatoes, vegetable stock, almond milk, herb mix, and black pepper. Mix well and bring to a simmer. Simmer on low for 10 minutes to let all of the flavors incorporate. Now it's time to thicken the liquid using a slurry. Add in the slurry and mix well to combine. Bring back to a simmer and cook until a desired pot pie consistency is reached. Roll out the pie crust and use the ramekins to punch out circles. Add slits in the dough to ensure air has a way to escape during cooking. I find it easier to do this while they're still on the cutting board. Brush oil onto the pie crust covers to help achieve a golden brown color and crunchy texture during cooking. We'll now fill the ramekins with the filling and cover with the pie crust. Since this is a kidney-friendly recipe, we won't have a traditional thick crust you're used to seeing in a pot pie. Instead, we'll push the pie crust covers inside the lip of the ramekins. Bake in a preheated 425-degree oven for 30 minutes or until golden brown. You are now ready to impress your friends and family with this easy, kidney-friendly, vegan pot pie recipe. You can find the full recipe on our website at cukebook.org. Happy cooking and enjoy.
And so this recipe, as mentioned in the video, is in fact kidney friendly. And there we go, kidney friendly. And a lot of the reason around how it is kidney friendly is we've removed the protein out of it, no chicken, so it's vegan. We have no added salt products and reducing that pie crust. That is a way that we have made that dish be very festive still and kidney friendly. I myself have made that a few times. I personally like to add chickpeas to it because it kind of adds a little meat to it, adds some fiber and some protein, as well as I traditionally make it in a pie crust, like a pie pan with that crust just over the top only. And it is quite the fan favorite. So it's kind of a nice main that isn't turkey itself. So let's talk about side dishes. Side dishes, here we can try and swap out fresh vegetables instead of canned. And you can cook vegetables with oil or spices instead of butter. Many times we can even make it that much lighter by deglazing pans with water instead of adding more oil on top of it as a way to make things a little more heart healthy. And canned veggies can be higher in sodium and potentially phosphorus depending on what is added to them. So making sure to rinse them and choosing fresh or frozen whenever possible. And the oil is a nice, healthier swap than the saturated fat of butter. But, you know, there are always ways to make things a little bit lighter. So trying to saute veggies in olive oil instead of butter or roast squash, and then double boiling things like mashed potatoes to reduce the potassium content, or you could even swap them out. Here's an example of honey glazed carrots that have honey on them, and honey is simple sugar. And so if you are someone who has blood sugar issues, changing from a honey glazed carrot to an oven roasted carrot, which both look beautiful and festive, and the oven roasted recipe is found on our website. You can easily reduce your added sugar that way and retain the flavor and retain the festive part. Here we've got green bean casserole. You could go full healthy and switch it to green beans almondine, which is just sauteed with some little bit of almond slices. That would be from like a much more like rich, unhealthier to super healthy. You could even meet in the middle. So on those green bean casserole, you could just decide to do a few changes. You might swap out canned green beans for fresh or frozen beans. You could rinse those beans. Many green bean casseroles call for condensed soups. You could get lower sodium versions or reduced fat versions. And the top of those crispy onions, you could reduce the amount that you add on top. So you could make all the change or one or two swaps to just make it a little bit lighter, a little bit healthier, and just as enjoyable. And as for the starch, whether you're worried about blood sugar, potassium, or overall calories, there's a lot of ways that you can freshen up potatoes in a different way. The mashed potatoes, you could double boil them to reduce your potassium. You could also swap it out fully for mashed cauliflower. Mashed cauliflower would be lower in potassium and lower in carbohydrates. And it is a way to not have to worry too much about the portion size. Now, the milk and the butter potentially that you add to a recipe like this will definitely impact on both sides will impact the fat content. Maybe you leave it in, maybe you reduce it. It's up to you. I will say when making a mashed cauliflower recipe, you want to add any type of non-dairy or dairy milk in the process of blending it very slowly, because potatoes do have a thicker texture, thicker consistency. And if you just dump in the required amount of non-dairy or dairy milk in the mashed cauliflower recipe, you may have a thinner product than you prefer. So make sure to add slowly with that mashed cauliflower. And when it comes to desserts, you don't have to deprive yourself. Choose freshly made desserts instead of packaged or frozen. Freshly made desserts often have less added phosphorus and they've been adapted. So you have the opportunity to make a healthier version or use less sugar in that to make a healthier version. And you can make simple substitutions like switching out plain yogurt for sour cream or incorporating less of a specific item based on your nutrients that you are trying to reduce or restrict or modulate, as well as fruit is always a great dessert. Baked apples or baked pears are wonderful options as well. And when thinking about drinks, consider swapping out non-dairy milk for cow's milk, which non-dairy milk often is lower in potassium and phosphorus. And you can do that for holiday drinks that are like hot chocolate or eggnog or things like that. But it also works obviously for coffee and things like that. And then you can also try to swap out, make little mocktails with sparkling water and a little splash of juice as a lower sugar option versus your high juice choice. So let's talk about an example meal because I just threw a whole lot out at you. This example menu, based on what we talked about today, could look very much like this. Having a veggie tray with hummus that you put out on the plate, a charcuterie board that has very little deli meat, if any. You can include unsalted nuts that are beautiful and yummy, some grapes. We already talked about hummus. You can do little dips that way, and a fruit plate. Dinner, you could have a salad or green beans almondine mashed cauliflower or double boiled mashed potatoes. You can still include your stuffing. Be aware you want to look and read the food label for how much salt is in stuffing. And if you are someone who is monitoring your blood sugar, remember there are carbohydrates in stuffing. Cranberry sauce is something that you can have that is very simple sugar and high sugar, but there are also reduced sugar options as well. Rolls, and you could have low sodium seasoned turkey or our veggie pot pie. In my house, we have vegan Thanksgiving with a side of turkey. And I think that's a great way to think about and frame if you're trying to eat more plant forward. If you're identifying your meal as with the vegetable first and the side of the animal product, then that's a great focus for when you build a balanced plate. Other great dessert options would be an apple crumble, pumpkin cheesecake or cookies, vanilla non-dairy ice cream, and or a fruit plate. Don't forget, regardless of how many substitutions, if any, you make, build a balanced plate that is plant forward. These plant forward options are going to naturally make things kidney friendly. Reducing the sodium out of the foods that we prepare can also help keep your blood pressure in range and not make your blood pressure medication work so hard, and stay hydrated and utilize the gravies and dressings and sparingly. We did go through your questions that you asked prior to our session, and thank you so much for doing so. I did try and answer the majority of the questions in the conversation itself, and make sure to develop the presentation around your needs. Some of the pull-out questions, I've got 3 that we'll talk through that seem to be fairly consistent. I need heart-healthy foods and CKD. What can I eat? This is a great question. All the foods we talked about today are very heart healthy. The concepts align the same through kidney health, through heart health, through diabetes health. High fruits and vegetables are high in fiber and they're low in saturated fat. That is going to be very, very heart healthy. Minimizing the animal protein on your plate, even if you're someone that is been told to eat more meat, you don't need to make the majority of your plate animal protein in order to get enough protein that meal. But by adding the majority, half your plate at least, of vegetables, you will have you'll have fiber in there and it will be heart healthy. And then making sure to monitor and the amount of salt that is going in is another great option to stay heart healthy. And lastly, we think about fat in general. If you're someone that is focused on heart health, anywhere that you are not sacrificing taste, go lighter. If you do that consistently throughout the day and even on a meal like this, you will not necessarily notice the change with a little less butter in that food. What are healthy festive drinks for CKD? The best thing for CKD is water. Sparkling waters are also great. I love, people make some really fun mocktails utilizing flavored sparkling waters with a splash of juice. Alcoholic beverages are not necessarily recommended. This is a conversation to have with your doctor. Some certain medications interact with alcohol. And if you do not drink, no amount of adding alcohol is healthy. Even when we hear that a glass of wine a day can be healthy for us. If you're somebody that does partake in alcohol, then sticking to that glass of wine is fine. But remember that alcohol is a part of, and all liquids are a part of your fluid restriction. And alcohol in itself can raise blood pressure. So utilizing not just a balanced plate, but a balanced day of movement, food, and drink is a great way to enjoy yourself and not end up feeling overloaded and tired at the end of your meal. And lastly, is there a kidney-friendly way to prepare turkey? Absolutely. Utilizing fresh herbs and seasonings, poultry seasoning that is salt-free is a great way to have less salt on that turkey. And then if we're also considering our heart in this, not eating the skin is also important. When it comes to dark meat versus white meat, that's up to you. Yes, absolutely, there is a fat content difference, but we do want to remember, even with all the things that I've talked about today, this is just one meal. This is not going to change your overall pattern. We want to be sure that we keep safety in the forefront. So if you're someone who is on a fluid restriction, who needs a real salt restriction, worried about any type of heart issues, or if you've been told that you really need to limit your potassium, these three things are very important for safety. When it comes to phosphorus or it comes to enjoyment, you want to just give yourself the opportunity to have fun and enjoy yourself. I want to thank you all for attending, as well as Responsible for CKD for having me. Again, if you were feeling like you needed more poignant information, please reach out. My website is here. Cute book with those recipes is there. Responsible is here to also help. responsiblehealth.com/CKD. So these are all great ways for you to feel supported through your own health journey.
Thank you, Lauren. Before we wrap up, I have two live Q&As here if you want to go ahead and answer those for us. Uh,
Sure.
and for those that are with us joining live today, if you have a live question, you can go ahead and put that in the Q&A box in your toolbar, and we'll try and get to those. If not live, then by email later. So the first one here is for the mashed potato or cauliflower, do you have a recommended non-dairy milk to use?
Oh, yeah. So non-dairy milk is very personal, I find, to most people. Any non-dairy milk is fine. You want to read the food label and see that there aren't phosphorus additives because many times non-dairy milks, they add calcium to it and they bind that with phosphorus. So as long as there's no phosphorus additive, whatever your preference is the right non-dairy milk. Oh, with the exception, do not choose a vanilla flavored non-dairy milk to make mashed potatoes.
I have personally done that before and it was horrible.
Not to,
So
yeah,
I can
exactly.
attest to that.
Yeah.
So, with your example plate, a second question here. With your example plate, are you saying that we shouldn't put more than 5 or 6 food items on it? Could I have more variety if I take smaller portions? How much of each dish is okay?
That's a really great question and a really thoughtful one. I appreciate that question very much. There is no specific or target number. You could have three options, you could have 12 options. It's really about what the proportion it takes up on the plate. And so it's really up to you. And I am a huge proponent of the leftovers and the to go plate, so that you're able to enjoy all of the options in the portions that you like.
And oh, we have another milk question here. Isn't almond milk better than soy milk as it is less protein?
So, that's a really great and interesting question. If you're adding, a half a cup of soy milk into a mashed cauliflower that serves 8 people, that is going to be extremely negligible. If you're drinking a glass of soy milk versus a glass of almond milk, then you would see that impact in the protein. And if you're someone that is on a very restrictive protein diet, that might be a good choice for you. So take portion into consideration.
That's great. If there are any more Q&A questions for us, you can go ahead, try and send them in now, or always reach out afterwards. Oh, one more. Is cranberry sauce actually high in phosphorus or potassium? I'm type 1 diabetic, so I know the carbs and sugars are high. I tend to only have 1/4 a cup.
Yeah, so I would follow based on your recommendations for blood sugar and not worry too much. I am a big fan of just always read your food label because if I say absolutely, you will find the one exception that has an additive in it.
I see someone here raised their hand. We don't have audio for attendees, but if you want to go ahead and type that into the Q&A, we can read the questions here. And while that's coming through, or if that message is coming through, Lauren, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed today's session because, especially as someone who's like an all or nothing person, it's so refreshing and nice to hear that there's ways and room to enjoy the holiday based on those personal recommendations and that the swaps don't have to be scary. Like there's still joy in the holiday and the meals with loved ones.
Yeah, and I can't say it any better than you just said it right now, and that's exactly the goal. Enjoy, make the swaps that make sense for you, and don't make it taste bland or gross.
Oh, last one here for the day, I believe. It says oh, cranberry sauce made with stevia. Is it better?
Yeah, that's a great option if you're worried about blood sugar or what your blood sugar may do or added sugars. Monk fruit may also be a good choice. I myself have not tried to make homemade cranberry sauce with either of those products. So, from a food texture perspective or food science perspective, definitely let me know if you do and have had success. But in theory, it absolutely would be great choices.
And do you have time for two more quick ones with us?
Sure, yeah.
Wonderful. We'll do these last two, and then again, if you have any more, keep on reaching out to us with the contact information. Okay, it says we can eat pork, a fresh one. Can you eat fresh pork, not ones from the store?
Yeah, so fresh pork is fine. It's a really, regardless of whether it's pork, fish, chicken, all those things, it's really about the portion size and lack of additives. So if it's fresh, it's not going to have additives most likely. And just make sure it doesn't say things like enhanced. Enhanced is the like term for I've pumped salt into it or some type of additive to it.
And then here, someone's asking if they can use light mayonnaise instead of milk for potatoes.
Sure, I've never tried that personally, but go for it.
Okay, looks like we got our Q&A here. For those who weren't with us in the beginning, this webinar was recorded. So you'll get a copy of this sent to the email that you used to register for today's session. So we can revisit, especially coming up on these holidays here, get all those recipes, which you can also find on cookbook.com. And we'll have all of the resources Lauren mentioned today and make sure we get that to you. Thank you so much, Lauren, for taking the time to join us again today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a great time.
Uh,
Happy holiday.
yes, happy holidays to all. And if you found us through something else, then within our community, we invite you to check out the Responsive for CKD community, where we have a ton of great information like this, as well as recordings of Lauren's previous webinars for you to watch, and some cookbook recipes, all the good things. So you can find that in the App Store on Android or iOS under Responsive for CKD or online at responsiveforckd.com. So with
Thank
that being
you.
said, thank you again, Lauren. It's such a pleasure. And until next time, take care and stay connected.
Stay well.